During this month of November, Christians and Catholics in particular, we're supposed to remember those who have gone before us and pray for them. And it brings up the question of, well, what role does grief play in the Christian life, right? Because we know Jesus wept when Lazarus died, but also we're not supposed to mourn as the pagans do, right? And I think one way to resolve that is, right, we're supposed to have the grief that's appropriate. Our emotions are supposed to be an appropriate response to whatever's going on in reality, an appropriate response to reality. And if we're not pagan, if we're Christian, we know that people's life is changed, not ended, as we pray in the Mass. But I found this really interesting reflection on grief from St. Paul the Cross. He was a really interesting character. I find very compelling because he had the dark night of the soul. We talked about, not having that consolation from God for the longest of any saint. Pretty much for 69 years he had that intense dark night of the soul, which I think is really attractive and really compelling. And what he says about grief, I think, is something we should meditate on. St. Paul of the Cross says, in one of his letters, "Love is a unifying virtue which takes upon itself the torments of its beloved Lord. It is a fire reaching through to the inmost soul. It transforms the lover into the one loved. More deeply, love intermingles with grief, and grief with love, and a certain blending of love and grief occurs. They become so united that we can no longer distinguish love from grief, nor grief from love. Thus the loving heart rejoices in its sorrow and exults in its grieving love. Therefore, be constant in practicing every virtue, and especially in imitating the patience of our dear Jesus, for this is the summit of pure love." So I think it's really powerful, really interesting, right? Because we know the damned, everything that they experience is suffering, but for the just, they experience more suffering and more love and more joy because they drink the cup of life more deeply. And I think that's just so powerful. Our hearts are bigger the closer we are to Jesus. Yes, we actually will experience more grief and stuff, but more joy too, more love, because we live more. And I think that's powerful.